The men who stole the World Cup in 1966 walked right past £3 million worth of rare stamps to reach it. On Sunday, March 20th, the iconic Jules Rimet trophy was on display at Westminster Central Hall in London. It was the star exhibit of a prestigious stamp exhibition, taking place just 4 months before England was set to host the tournament. While a Methodist congregation sang hymns in the main hall upstairs, someone quietly forced open a rear door, unscrewed the metal plate holding the display case's padlock, and lifted out a trophy insured for £30,000. Guards had checked the case at 11 in the morning. By 10 past 12, it was completely empty. What they took was a foot-tall winged figure of Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, sculpted by a Frenchman in 1930. About 3.8 kilograms of gold-plated sterling silver resting on a lapis lazuli base. Hold on to that phrase, gold-plated silver, because it decides exactly how this story ends. The cup had miraculously survived the Second World War in a shoebox hidden under the bed of an Italian FIFA vice president who hid it from the Nazis. The English Football Association managed to lose it inside of a week. 2 days after the theft, the FA's chairman received a phone call from a man calling himself Jackson. Soon after, a parcel arrived containing the removable lining from the very top of the trophy, undeniable proof of possession, along with a ransom demand for £15,000 in used banknotes. Jackson warned that if the police were involved, the cup would be melted down. The FA immediately called Scotland Yard. Here's the thing, though. Scotland Yard never actually recovered the trophy. The investigator who found it walked on 4 legs. The ransom handover was set for Battersea Park, where a detective posed as the chairman's assistant, carrying a suitcase packed with cut-up newspaper topped with a deceptively thin layer of real money. The man who climbed into his car was Edward Betchley, a 46-year-old local dealer whose entire criminal record consisted of stealing tins of corned beef. Betchley quickly spotted the unmarked police cars, following them, and bolted. He was caught within minutes. He aggressively insisted he was only a middleman for a mysterious figure he called the Pole, and claimed he could not produce the trophy. 7 days after the theft, a local man named David Corbett left his South London flat to use a neighborhood phone box, taking his dog, Pickles, a 4-year-old collie cross. Suddenly, Pickles pulled hard toward a parcel wrapped in old newspaper lying under a garden hedge. Corbett tore a corner off, half expecting a bomb, and saw a small gold figure and winner's plaques engraved with the words Germany, Uruguay, Brazil. The dog had just found the World Cup. At the police station, Corbett was initially treated as the prime suspect, and detectives interrogated him until his alibi cleared. Reward money from insurers and newspapers eventually brought him about £6,000, at a time when the entire England squad, who won the final that July, split a £22,000 bonus, just £1,000 a man. Pickles became an overnight celebrity. He was awarded a silver medal from the National Canine Defense League, a year's supply of free food, and even landed a part in a 1966 spy comedy film. He even attended the official winners' banquet after the final, where he happily licked the players' plates clean. Tragically, a year later, he died chasing a cat when his lead snagged on a fallen tree. The FA chairman didn't live to see the tournament win. He died of a sudden heart attack that June, weeks before the opening match. Betchley served 2 years for extortion and died in 1969 without ever naming a single accomplice. Notice what's missing from all of that, though. Nobody was ever charged with the actual break-in. That question remains completely open today. The FA, badly shaken by the embarrassment, begged FIFA for permission to manufacture a replica, but FIFA strictly refused. The FA secretly commissioned one anyway from a silversmith named George Bird, and for years, the high-quality copy went out to public fan events while the genuine original stayed locked in a vault. Keep Bird's replica in mind. It turns up at a high-stakes auction decades later. Who actually broke into Central Hall was never legally settled. Historians who combed through the Metropolitan Police case files found absolutely nothing, tying the middleman to the burglary itself, concluding the thief was never identified. In 2018, relatives of a notorious South London gangster named Sidney Cougalier told reporters that Sidney and his brother had taken the cup almost on impulse after noticing how incredibly thin the security was. No one has ever proved it. In 1970, the real trophy left England for good. Jules Rimet's founding rules promised the cup outright to the first nation to win 3 World Cup titles, and Pelé's legendary Brazil squad won their third in Mexico City that June. The trophy went on permanent display at the Brazilian Football Confederation's headquarters in Rio de Janeiro, protected inside a cabinet fronted with heavy bulletproof glass. On the night of December 19, 1983, thieves broke into the building, tied up the night watchman, and walked right around to the back of the display cabinet, which was made of cheap wood. They effortlessly levered it open with a crowbar and left with the trophy in minutes. The bulletproof glass was never even touched. Both high-profile thefts went through the container rather than the guards, a padlock plate you could easily unscrew from behind in London, and a bulletproof window set into a wooden box in Rio. To me, that's the real story here. Everyone protecting this priceless object only ever armored the side people were looking at. Rio police broke the case within weeks. The mastermind was an insider who had seen the cabinet up close on regular visits to the building, recruiting 2 ex-convicts to pull off the break-in. The buyer was an Argentine gold dealer operating out of Rio named Juan Carlos Hernandez. What Hernandez did next is the reason this story has no real ending. 40 years later, people in Brazil are still arguing about it. The police ultimately concluded that Hernandez melted the Jules Rimet trophy down within days, pouring it into untraceable gold bars. But remember, the physical makeup of the cup. It was sterling silver under a very thin gold skin. Melted down indiscriminately, it would have yielded just a few hundred grams of actual gold and a worthless lump of silver worth a tiny fraction of what a black market collector would have paid for the intact trophy. Either the thieves had absolutely no idea what they were holding, or the melting story was a brilliant cover. Plenty of Brazilians still believe the original is sitting entirely intact in a private vault somewhere. The men were convicted, the metal was never traced, and not a single fragment of the trophy has surfaced in the decades since. A replacement copy was later cast using 1.8 kilograms of actual gold, and that copy is what visitors to the Brazilian Confederation see today. But what about Bird's secret British replica? When it finally came up for auction at Sotheby's in 1997 with an estimate of £30,000, the bidding fiercely climbed to over £250,000. The winning bidder turned out to be FIFA itself, paying an astronomical fee on the heavy suspicion that this was secretly the true original, swapped at some point and quietly preserved. Metallurgical testing came back. The artifact was cheap bronze under a layer of gold gilding. FIFA had spent £250,000 buying the exact copy they had once forbidden anyone to make. That replica now sits in the National Football Museum in Manchester, resting just a few display cases away from Pickles, the dog's collar.